Agent Mulder.
No, come on.
Yeah.
It's your 302. Assistant Director Skinner just approved it.
There's a mistake here. There's been another agent assigned to the case.
That would be me. Krycek. Alex Krycek.
Skinner didn't say anything about taking on a partner.
It wasn't Skinner. Actually, I opened the file 2 hours before your request, so technically it's my case.
Listen, I appreciate the show and tell, and I don't want you to take this personally, but I work alone.
Hello, and welcome to Discovering the X-Files, the podcast in which a newbie takes a deep dive into the entirety of Chris Carter's universe, while longtime fans escort me on the journey. A perilous journey filled with government conspiracies or weird monsters every other week. I'm Erix Antoine, and today Daniel and I will be discussing Sleepless, which originally aired in the US on October 7th, 1994. It was written by Howard Gordon and directed by Rob Bowman. In this episode, Mulder is assigned a new partner, Alex Krycek. They investigate an odd case in which it seems a group of scientists and Vietnam veterans, who were part of a sleep deprivation experiment, are being killed off in very strange and almost inexplicable ways. This Monster of the Week episode features several great and important guest stars, such as Mitch Pileggi as Skinner and William B. Davis as the Smoking Man, but it also features John Grease as a traumatized vet, and the wonderful Tony Todd making one of his several welcome appearances on 90s genre TV. It also introduces Nicholas Lee as Krycek, and Stephen Williams as the mysterious X. As I said, it's an important episode, and after the break, Daniel and I are going to get into it. Stick around.
Data from a top-secret military project, born of the idea that sleep is the soldier's greatest enemy.
Person was conducting sleep deprivation experiments on Paris Island.
Not deprivation, eradication.
Why?
Why else? To build a better soldier. Sustained wakefulness dulls fear, heightens aggression. Science had just put a man on the moon. So they look to science to win a losing war.
You think Cole's behind what's happening now?
I'm not here to do your thinking, Agent Mulder. All I know is Augustus Cole hasn't slept in 24 years.
So yeah, this is kind of what I think could be called a stealth mythology episode, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's a thing, but what I am noticing is that you had it to some degree, but not really in the first season. You had episodes where like Deep Throat would show up, and they would just throw him in there to give some exposition, and that's fine. But here, it's more like they're conscious that they have this formula where you have like Monster of the Week episodes, and you have quote unquote mythology episodes. But you have a situation like this where there is kind of an ongoing storyline that they haven't ignored. So they've carried over a storyline from the previous season, which is that the X-Files have been shut down, and Mulder and Scully have been separated. But there are certain forces within the FBI that are trying to help out. They have secret friends in the FBI, let's say, who want to sort of lend a helping hand. And a couple of episodes ago, we saw, Mulder receiving a mysterious phone call. And now in this episode, we finally see who that person was. And it turns out to be Stephen Williams of 21 Jump Street and Jason Goes to Hell fame. I think it's a wonderful casting. It was just so good to see that it turned out to be him after all. Apparently that wasn't originally the intention. They had actually cast a woman in that part. And then they'd cast the actress who played, the Admiral from Next Generation and DS9. She had like a Russian name, and right now it escapes me. But the point is that she was that actress was cast in this role because, and that's sort of because when you first see the character in The Host, it's this thing where you don't see the character. It's just like a voice on the other end of the line, on the other end of the phone. You sort of see a silhouette. You see a person sitting in a chair, but you don't really see them. Throws out these cryptic lines and has this really weird voice. It sounds like comic book guy from The Simpsons or something. And so I think the intention was that, yeah, she was electronically distorting her voice, and now we would find out, oh, it's not a man at all, it's a woman. But apparently it didn't work out. They had shot some scenes, and they just felt that she wasn't right at the end, and they decided to bring in Stephen Williams. So I think that was very interesting. I'm sure she would have done okay. I mean, I wouldn't know. She was fine on Next Generation and everything else, but I guess there just wasn't the chemistry. The chemistry wasn't there. Maybe she just didn't quite do what they wanted from that character.
I'm guessing that was the issue.
Yeah. But to my point initially was just that, so you have episodes like this that have a storyline, sort of a self-contained mystery or story that's going on, but it's still sort of carrying over the plot line. So it's becoming a more serialized kind of show. It's sort of morphing into that. And I get the sense that that's sort of what they're doing now in the season, even though we're only 4 episodes in. But I get the sense that they're doing that. And I think it's good. I think it gives it more weight. And I think that it's almost a bait and switch, because it's sort of like, oh, you thought you were going to get a Monster of the Week episode, but now we've hooked you, because now there's clearly things going on that you're going to have to keep tuning in. I'm sorry, you're just going to have to keep tuning in if you want to find out how this pans out. You're just going to have to tune in next week and the week after that and the week after that. So, it's a clever way to sort of hook viewers, and I think they're finding the right balance between, let's tell a compelling story, but let's put enough little nuggets in there that we don't have to resolve right away, just so that there's something going on. So I think it makes it feel like I guess it makes the world just feel more alive, more full. Like there's things going on. It's not just this one case.
Yeah, it even without talking about the actual A plot of the episode, Sleepless is a very important episode because, like you said, we finally get a look at X, who is a friend of Deep Throat by his own admission. And then we also get the introduction of Agent Alex Krycek, which is important for the ongoing series as well. So it's 2 big bombs dropped in the middle of what would be a normal Monster of the Week episode in other scenarios.
This could have been a perfectly fine, enjoyable episode on its own terms if it hadn't been tied to the story arc. If it had just been Mulder and Scully, let's say, investigating these mysterious deaths, fine, it would have worked. But I think because they add these other details, it's more compelling. I think it ties it into the main story. It makes it feel like there's a lot going on, so you get more invested in the series as a whole. I think it's just the right choice to go with it. And yeah, I was going to say, like, Alex Krycek. So they bring him in, and by the end of the episode, you already realize that, okay, so he's not exactly all that he's cracked up to be. He's not exactly the fresh-faced rookie that he's pretending to be. Clearly, there's some shady shit going on, and this is an actor that we saw last season in Genderbender, in a small but important role as one of the victims, and he made a good impression in that episode, and here he makes a good impression again. So clearly they got him. I think Rob Bowman, who had directed Genderbender and directs this episode, I think liked him. When they were casting the episode, I think he just remembered, we had this actor in that other episode I directed who did a really good job. Why don't we bring him back? He might be good for this. And so, that was interesting. And I'm curious to see how this character evolves, because it's, clearly there's more going on, and we'll see what happens. But one thing that I wonder, what led to this, and I'm thinking that maybe part of it is Gillian Anderson's pregnancy. Yeah, because it's like there's an episode where, she's in it for a few minutes, shot from the neck up, and just like she's always sitting down, either in like at her office or somewhere. And so she's just there to sort of do what she needs to do. But what I'm wondering is, was the decision to shut down the X-Files and then subsequently separate Mulder and Scully, did they do that because Gillian Anderson got pregnant? Or
I don't think so.
Okay, like, so what's your thinking? Because let's assume Gillian Anderson hadn't gotten pregnant, and that they didn't need to sort of figure out how to work around that. So the idea of bringing in Krycek, because you need that dynamic, I guess, to figure the stories work better when Mulder has somebody to play off of. If it's not just him investigating on his own, I think maybe it's because they figure that that interplay of having two people sort of bouncing off each other, bouncing ideas off each other, is what makes the show work. And so that's why they brought in Krycek. I'm wondering what the thinking was there.
I'm not sure. It's hard to, and I guess we'll get into it once we get to these next couple episodes even further. It's hard to imagine exactly how things might have played out without the pregnancy. Obviously, it still would have been a whole, we're going to spend this season proving that the FBI needs the X-Files. Mm-hmm. But I think they probably would have gone about it a different way. But yeah, you're right. They clearly know or think that Mulder needs someone to play off of, whether it's intermittently interacting with Scully for these first few episodes, whether it's hanging out with the cop in Blood, or bringing in Alex Krycek, who I think when they originally brought him in, I guess they figured if he didn't work out, they'd just bump him off on down the line. But they like the actor enough that he sticks around longer than that. I think what we're going through right now, where they're interacting together as much as they possibly can without getting in trouble, I would imagine that would have carried on longer than it ends up doing had the pregnancy not been involved.
So you're thinking maybe Krycek was always going to be something that they would have maybe brought in, like separating Mulder and Scully. Do you think that was always part of the plan, even for a brief moment? Like,
I think so, and I wouldn't put it past them to have saddled Mulder, or even her as well, with another partner for at least a short little bit. Whether or not it would have been someone who is clearly not who he says he is and is informing straight to the cigarette smoking man, I don't know. But yeah, I think we would have had a stretch no matter what, where Mulder ended up working with someone else.
Because one thing that I definitely like that they're doing, and I talked about this with Clay when we talked about Host, but one thing that I like is that they don't immediately solve the problem. You know what I mean? It's the sort of thing where if we can look at the finale, the season 1 finale, the X-Files have been shut down, as a kind of cliffhanger, right? If let's say we look at it like, oh, this is oh shit, no more X-Files. What a way to end the season. And other shows, lesser shows, would have been like, oh, and guess what? By minute 35 of episode 1 of season 2, the X-Files are up and running again. And so doing that is like, well, then what was the whole point? Like, why waste our time like this? Why bother doing that if you're not going to explore that, So what I like that here, clearly they're exploring the concept of, well, this is what it's like when the X-Files don't exist. Mm-hmm. And this is what Mulder and Scully are like when they're not working together on the X-Files. This is how they're sort of flailing around in their separate little spaces, sort of going through the day, and clearly missing working together, and clearly missing, for all of Scully's skepticism, there's that wonderful little exchange that they have over the phone when, he's telling her about Krycek, and there's that little bit where it's like, he's not as quick to skepticism, like, oh, you mean as I was, whatever. And so like, sort of like he's more open to the possibilities, something like that, right? He's more open to the possibilities. And she's like, then I was, right? So I guess it must be great to now have somebody who just sort of believes everything you say and like whatever. And he doesn't say that she's right. He misses her. He misses working with her. And that sort of dynamic, separating them and making them want to start working together again, and I guess making the fans of the show sort of long for that, because you figure, well, eventually, okay, even if I hadn't watched, even if I didn't know that this is going to have 10 seasons and more, and so obviously at some point I imagine the X-Files will be up and running again. When, how, I guess we'll see. But one can assume. But even if I didn't know that, I would still, even if this were 1994 and I'm sitting there watching this for the first time, I'm pretty sure that in the back of my head I'll be like, well, I mean, obviously they're eventually going to reopen the X-Files, but it'll be interesting to see how that happens. It'll be interesting to see how they eventually get these two to work together again, and it'll be so satisfying when it finally happens, because they didn't just blow their wad like in the first episode. They're building to it, and maybe Gillian Anderson's pregnancy forced them to stretch that a bit more than they might have under other circumstances. Like maybe it forced the writers to be more creative and just figure out ways to let the story sort of let it be more of a slow burn, and let's introduce these other elements and sort of explore those elements and build so that we can get to a much more satisfying reveal, or a much more satisfying moment of when they finally get together again and start up the X-Files. And so that's good. I can definitely appreciate that, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And they are teasing it out a good bit. I mean, you have, I know, both in his phone call in Host, and then he again says it in person this time. X is big. The reinstatement of the X-Files must be undeniable. He says it at least twice so far in the season. And then you also have, it might have been Host as well, where Skinner just looks at Mulder straight in the face and said, I know, this should have been an X-File.
Yeah.
We all take our orders from someone, Mr. Mulder. So it's it's clear that even he didn't want to shut it down and was forced to. So it's not so much a fetch quest, but it's turned the season into, all right, we need to build up enough cases and solve enough things to where they absolutely have to reopen the department, the two-person department.
Yes, right. No, yeah, I mean, and to your point about Skinner, it is in Host where he basically says, we all answer to somebody, so it's little bits like that where you really get the sense that Skinner, he's ultimately a very sympathetic character, and he's in here for a few minutes. He's got the great scene, where he's like, yes, I read the story, I'm aware of it, Mulder, and I love the way Mitch Pileggi plays Skinner, like this really laid back, just sort of there's like this simmering tension,
yes.
In the way that he approaches the character, where he's just on that line, like just that simmering tension, where his reaction to everything, yes, I read the story, oh, I'm aware, like all the outlandish facts don't seem to faze him. He's just very cool. He's very cool about that. But you even there, you get the sense that he's in the back of his mind, because he Mulder is asking to be assigned to it, and he's going like, "What? Why? Why do you want me to assign you to this? Like, what's the deal? I'm still fucking you over. I'm still punishing you. You're still supposed to be sitting in your office listening to like mobsters phone calls. So what are you doing here? Like get back to work." But there's this thing where you get the sense that Skinner does want to make sure that he wants to help him out. He wants to give him that kind of, there's a part of him that wants him to be given an excuse to reopen the X-Files.
It's always the 1-2 punch with Skinner, because even in this one, he's basically saying, all right, I'll review your request. And internally, Mulder's probably smiling. And then comes the punchline. In the meantime, you still have 24 hours worth of tapes to transcribe.
Right.
Get out of here.
Yeah, it's like, there are only so many hours in the day, Mulder. So what are you doing in this office? You better be back at your desk, because you've got a deadline. It is fun, but he's great. I mean, Mitch Pileggi really is great, and and I just love the way that he plays the character, and it just makes him really interesting. It was a very good choice for them to sort of transition from what they were doing in the first season, where you sort of had every other week you'd have some random authority figure, that would be there, just a foil kind of character, and you'd think to yourself, okay, but for them to just say, you know what? That's going to get tired. That's going to get boring. Let's bring somebody else in that we can use, and we can always use, where he can be a foil, but there has to be a part of him that is sympathetic, so that audiences can take to him, because it's boring if he's just like another bad guy, another obstacle, just whatever, because you've got enough of that, and you've already got the smoking man for that. You've got the smoking man and the mysterious men in that room, in the smoky room, sitting at the end of the long table, just sort of sitting there ominously as Krycek walks in and sort of lays it out for them. And okay, I think that's good enough. We don't need to just let it all be about that. It's good to know that you have other figures like Skinner who are kind of in between, and who are ultimately, or now Stephen Williams, who are sort of, they're there to sort of provide, sort of back up Mulder and all of this stuff in their own way, within their means. So that is a very cool thing. But we haven't talked about the actual episode, the A story, which is extremely interesting and fascinating. It's a compelling story which has, leave it to the X-Files, of course. It's got Tony Todd, the wonderful Tony Todd, in a wonderful performance. Tony Todd is just one of the great actors. I think you agree with me because you're a horror fan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so clearly he's one of those guys that, like, whenever you see him, it's just it's whatever it is, whether it's something like Candyman, or whether he shows up as a more secondary role in some action movie or whatever it is, it's always just, oh, it's great, it's Tony Todd. Like, he's going to command your attention. And he did a lot of like 90s genre TV, didn't he? Just guest spots left and right.
And they kind of got him at his, I mean, he's never really gone away since he truly burst onto the scene, but they kind of got him at his peak here because, I mean, he was literally hot off of the Night of the Living Dead remake, Candyman. I think he was in Excessive Force, wasn't he?
Yes.
And then he had just done The Crow as well this same year. So it's just one after another, popping up in everything.
Yeah, he's just showing up. He was one of those faces, and so that's what I remember. I mean, I remember back then I wasn't a regular viewer of the X-Files, but Tony Todd was always one of those guys who would show up in something, and I'd just be like, oh yes, So it just you'd see him, and you'd wait for the moment that he's going to finally get his showcase role or whatever, because he's just always reliable. And as you said, he hasn't ever really gone away. He continues to just do great work. He'll always show up in something, and it's always fun to see him. Whether it's, I mean, he was a bad guy on 24 for one of those seasons. That was very memorable. He was I think when a bunch of I guess they're African terrorists take over the White House. I don't know what season that was, but it was, and he's like the corrupt general or whatever of the faction that takes it over, and he did a great job there. But around here, this is 94. Yeah, I mean, TNG had already wrapped, and I think he would show up on DS9 eventually in his role as Worf's brother. But it's he's just one of those great actors, and it's so good to see him. He doesn't have like tons of scenes, but whenever he's on screen, he's just a very compelling character. The thing about the plot of this, the concept is soldiers who were experimented on in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Or on Paris Island, right? That's where that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm to understand that they were actually in Paris Island, and then they were actually sent out into the field. But the experiments happened on Paris Island, and so he just wants to avenge. He wants to exact justice for what was done to them and what they were forced to do because of what was done to them. He feels that it's because of the experiments that they basically became psychotic.
I don't remember if they said how big the squad was of these experimental soldiers, but I know they said they had wiped out like confirmed 4,000 kills.
Yeah,
just one platoon just wiped out at least 4,000 people.
Right. Yes.
Jesus Christ.
It's pretty incredible. And the thing is that, and they make a point of sort of trying to ground it in some kind of a reality, because just in case it seems like, well, really, did that stuff go on? And they remind you of the whole My Lai massacre, which is a real thing, and that was actually, as I said, they make a point of saying, well, in difference to the My Lai soldiers, these soldiers were not prosecuted for what they've done. So in this particular case, it's sort of like, so that's what he's doing. He feels that he wants to atone for it, and he wants to make the surviving platoon atone for it, and also the people responsible for the experiment, which is the doctor and the other guy, the people who did it. And I guess, I mean, if you really sit down and think about it, the idea of somebody who hasn't slept in 24 years is not, it's, I don't know to what degree I can buy that as being even humanly possible. I don't know if it's possible. I mean, that doesn't, because they're saying that, so they remove a part of your brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you get your serotonin from supplements.
Yeah.
You don't need to get it from sleep. But I think it's more, sleep is more than just serotonin. And sure, if you're, because the idea of sleep deprivation experiment, these things do happen. And we, like, that has happened. There have been experiments of sleep deprivation, and it's been documented that people begin to hallucinate and all of that stuff when they're deprived of sleep. Yes, so that's true. But 24 years? I mean, 24 years.
Time.
I mean, it makes me wonder: is literally, or is it just a figure of speech that they barely ever sleep, or is it literally they've never slept?
I know. Of course, we haven't mentioned him yet, but John Grease also shows up as one of the few surviving soldiers, and
right.
he reiterates the 24 years, and he makes a comment at one point that they would have to stop and rest, but not nearly to the degree that anyone else would. Like, I got the impression that they would just maybe sit down in the jungle for a little bit and then just get up and start moving again.
Right. Yeah, well, okay, so yeah, John Grease does bring that up, and almost to hammer the point home, you know, like his eyes are like he's got like red eyes, like his eyelids are just like bloodshot, you know, and so you go, okay, so this guy, you know, I guess he hasn't really closed his eyes in a very long time. But that's a good point, because when Tony Todd goes to visit the other platoon survivor, the one who I'm going to call him Canadian Danny Trejo. I don't know. He's like this guy who's like sitting in his apartment watching TV, right? And you get like the sense that, okay, so he's another guy who probably hasn't slept in 24 years, and here he is watching TV, sitting, you know, in his living room, and you figure, okay, so I guess maybe that's how they rested. Maybe, you know, watch a little TV or whatever it is, and maybe doze off for like a minute or something, and come back, if that, you know, and then just sort of, I guess you're just in this perpetual state of like being exhausted. Although no, they bring up the point that they didn't get tired, that they didn't get tired in the normal sense, that they didn't get exhausted like the way it is when, like, if I'm sure we can all relate to some situation where for whatever reason we've pulled an all-nighter and we're just exhausted, you know what I mean? And so there's this thing where you can't even if you wanted to, you can't, like, you start to just nod off. I mean, you shut down, you know? The implication here is that didn't happen to them, right?
Might be more mental exhaustion would be my
right.
Sit there and stare at the wall for a while,
right?
Until everything reboots.
Yeah, I mean, because that's what it is. Exactly. The mind will get tired no matter what, you know, because you're in constant, you know, stimulation or whatever else. Eventually, you are exhausted. So, and Howard Gordon wrote this. He was inspired to write this because he was suffering from insomnia, and I guess that's usually where the best ideas come from, right? Where you take them from like your real life and you say, okay, well, what would be a really horrifying reality for somebody who, you know, let's say you had insomnia forever and you just could not sleep. No matter how exhausted you were, you simply could not sleep. And it's just, so yeah, it's a horrifying concept.
Yeah, I do like how the first survivor that we meet, that Tony Todd meets up with, once he realizes that he's there to kill him, but it's more of a mercy killing, at least as far as Tony Todd is concerned. Like, he's not murdering his friend, he's putting him to rest. And I like how he doesn't argue with him, he doesn't fight it at all, he just stands there, closes his eyes, and accepts it.
Yeah, he accepts it, and he kind of, when you say it's a mercy killing, I sort of get the sense that Tony Todd does it in a way that for the soldier, for Canadian Danny Trejo, it's what he feels is justified. Like, he feels it's what he deserves for what he's done. I think there's a part of him that obviously is racked with guilt over what happened. And so the fact that he has essentially the ghosts of the murdered Vietnamese village essentially, execute him. I guess he feels that this is poetic. This is how it should be. So maybe that's one of the reasons why he just accepts his fate. And even, I mean, John Grease, when Mulder and Krycek go to check in on John Grease, he's like, so are you going to kill me now? He's sort of like, I think a part of him wants them to, like you always get the sense that, all right, let's get this over with. Can you just like go out back? Like we're like, where are we going to do this? That's sort of like his attitude seems to be like that. He doesn't try to run away. Like he just sort of, he calmly accepts what's coming.
And he's still out there. Tony Todd didn't know about him.
Yeah.
Although I will say he should really quit that busboy job and become a truck driver, because just imagine how much money he could make not having to stop and sleep anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I go like that. You're right. If I had a problem like that, because one thing that sucks about like when you're like tired, like mentally tired, and you're I think the worst thing, and you probably will agree with me, is having to deal with people.
Oh God, yes.
So like, and you've worked in the service industry.
Yes.
So you're aware of this. So just imagine being like suffering from a bout of insomnia. You get no sleep, and you're on your shift, and you've got to deal with the usual thing that anyone who works in the service industry has to deal with: belligerent customers, people coming in, somebody wanting to like, take back their order, or somebody like, just like that, just that idea, being in a busy environment like of a restaurant with people, plates are clanking and noise and the people and the music and everything. I think it would drive you insane. Like more insane than you probably already are from lack of sleep. So at least in a truck, if you just have to drive a truck cross country, like transporting goods or transporting gas or like whatever, it's just you, it's you and the radio, and you're all good. You stop over for a piss once in a while, maybe grab yourself a burger, get back in your truck.
Just keep going.
It's all good. It's and you'd get a lot of work done. You'd get a lot of deliveries, more than other people, because you wouldn't need to spend 6 hours in a motel. But yeah, it's an interesting episode. The one thing that, again, the typical let's not give an explanations, they don't get into how Tony Todd is able to do this and why he can, but neither John Grease nor Canadian Danny Trejo can. So that part I wasn't entirely clear on. That Tony Todd has this ability to project his visions and use his psychic visions to kill people. How? Is there anything in the episode, maybe I missed something that sort of goes into that?
They make some vague comments at one point about electrical stimuli while someone is sleeping. You can affect their dreams, which Mulder seems incredibly like offended and worried about. Like he seems really mad that that's a thing that science can do. So they drop that in there a little bit, and then we go over the fact that Tony Todd has been pretty much in solitary confinement in the mental hospital that he's in because he's too disruptive to the other patients. And then on top of that, you have Mulder just tossing out a random vague guess of maybe this guy's figured out how to, manipulate those energies to where he can stimulate someone's mind and show them visions of things that they're afraid of. But basically all I can guess is that since Tony Todd was just sitting in a cell, just a tiny little room for most of his, I don't know how long he was there. I guess he figured out how to make that work somehow on his own. And Mulder wanted to find out how, but then he ended up dying at the end, so don't get your answer.
And that's one thing also that I was a little bit, I wasn't 100% clear on. At the end, when, Mulder's cornered Tony Todd at the construction site or whatever, he's cornered him. And then Krycek shows up, right? And there's this whole thing that goes on where, Tony Todd pulls a gun, and so Krycek has to kill him, has to put him down. What I wasn't sure about was Tony Todd doing this? I mean, you get the sense that he commits suicide by cop, essentially. I mean, Tony Todd at that point wants to die. As far as he's concerned, he's atoned for what happened, and now it's his time to go. So at that point, I think he goes up there because he wants to jump off, I think.
Yeah. It looked like he was going to impale himself on that big pole that was sticking up, which that's kind of how he ends up dying a few years later in The Rock.
Yes.
It's a delayed impalement for Tony Todd. I get the impression that had Mulder and Krycek not shown up, he would have just leapt to his death. And then once they were there, he realized that he couldn't really push Mulder into killing him. Once Mulder's partner shows up, then he plants the image in Krycek's mind just to make sure that he's going to get blown away.
Right, exactly. So he figures, okay, Mulder won't do this, but this other guy will do it. So that's I interpreted that correctly. I figured he makes Krycek kill him, essentially.
Yeah.
And Mulder doesn't. I guess he doesn't have the heart to tell Krycek that, because he's like, yeah, you did the right thing. Kind of quietly just says that. I mean, Krycek is being very cooperative at that point.
Yeah.
When you think about it, what we find out a few minutes later about Krycek, that he seems to be working for the shady forces that are actually against Mulder. Whatever they're doing, they don't necessarily want to eliminate Mulder.
Right.
Because they totally could have right then and there.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But clearly there's something else going on, and that's what's intriguing. That's the part where you go, so what do they want? Because like in that final scene, it's this thing where, okay, so Mulder, I'll be able to get more information, whatever. I'm going, the implication is that now Mulder kind of trusts him. Mm-hmm. I guess it's like, okay, I saved his life. I'm here, all that stuff, right? So he essentially is trying to earn Mulder's trust, and you would think maybe to get some information. But they make that point where it's like, but Scully is a problem. Scully is the problem, Gillian Anderson got pregnant, so Scully is the problem. It's like every problem has a solution. Just like, that ominous final note of Smoking Man. Every problem has a solution. We'll just shoot around her, and we'll give Mulder another partner, and we'll stick her in one scene because we're contractually obligated to do so, and we'll just shoot her face. I don't know. There's like a meta aspect to that. That's why I found that kind of funny. That whole like Scully is the problem. Every problem has a solution. And that's how we'll handle that. But in any case, they are planting the seeds for something here. And I just think that it's a little bit funny that Scully is the problem, quote unquote, since Scully is the skeptic. Scully is the one who was brought in specifically to debunk Mulder. So the part that I'm a little bit unclear of is, why are they now seeing Scully as the problem if she continues to be the skeptic?
I can see why you and I and anyone else viewing it would realize that Scully is the problem here. But from Krycek and the cigarette smoking man standpoint, they wouldn't know the information, which is the simple fact that as of the season premiere, Mulder was about 2 steps away from quitting the FBI and just going off on his own, and she talks him out of it. We know that. They don't know that. But they're just kind of fudging that a little bit anyway.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think, yeah. Well, there you go. I think Krycek basically was able to see firsthand that Mulder and Scully have a very special connection. Mm-hmm. And he, like, part of the reason why he was sent in there was to, sort of figure that out, earn Mulder's trust, but also try to get some inside information. I would imagine that they're aware that there are other forces like Stephen Williams and whoever else is involved. And so they want to find out who these people are. And obviously they figure that, okay, well, we're going to get to them through Mulder. And so we need somebody to earn Mulder's trust. Yeah. And, Scully is obviously, she's never going to betray Mulder. So it's got to be this guy. And now Scully's there, and she's still kind of protecting Mulder. And Mulder can still go to her for help. And so that's why she's a problem. So, I guess it is, yeah. It's all about... So they want. So you're saying that they want Mulder to quit, like that. Like that's what they were hoping he would do.
I think they view just straight up killing Mulder or firing him would just make him a martyr of sorts. Whereas if he just walked away, at least from the bureau, and became some lone gunman style crazy kook running around the country on his own, he would be far less of a threat.
Right. Yeah. I mean, nobody would give a shit about him then anymore anyway. So, and he wouldn't have any power, and he wouldn't have any access, so it wouldn't matter. So I guess that's a good point. And he's not somebody like Deep Throat was essentially assassinated because he was somebody in a position of power that clearly they said, okay, you're fucking things up for us. You're supposed to be on our side, and you're fucking things up for us. So we're just going to get rid of you because you know no one's supposed to even know about you anyway. So it doesn't matter. And you haven't actually been out there, so nobody's going to care that you're gone, except Mulder. But whatever.
Right.
So that's the that's I guess that's the main difference.
Yeah, and then you have, building on top of that, you have X saying, I'm not willing to make the same sacrifices that my predecessor made. Just full stop. I'm not going to die for you, Mulder. Turns around and leaves.
He's very clear about that.
And then back to the Scully Krycek thing. Her reactions to him are hysterical to me because she's jealous, but it's not man-woman jealous. It's professional jealousy. And she kind of eyeballs him down the way you would if your best friend, be they male or female, brings their latest boyfriend or girlfriend in. Yeah. Just kind of sizing him up and giving him the look that says, I'm sure you're nice, but if you hurt my friend, I will kill you.
Yeah, and I think that there's an element there where she doesn't entirely trust him, of course. She doesn't know who he is. And Mulder doesn't either. It is funny how at the start of this episode, though, Mulder is put in the position of the lone wolf, the whole I work alone kind of thing. I was like, well, you didn't work alone for a whole year. Like, so what are you talking about? But yeah, no, it's very compelling. I'm very curious, and I know that what comes next is obviously going to build on this. I'm going to be curious to see where things go. So is there anything else we haven't brought up about this episode?
Two small things. Number one, when Scully is looking at the corpse of the first person that died in the fake fire, it's got its fists upright.
Yeah.
All I have to say is Pugilistic Attitude is a good name for a band. And then back to Stephen Williams, and I was thinking about it even more this time around because we also have Mitch Pileggi in here. Pileggi shows up in, of course, an offspring show of the X-Files is Supernatural, which I guess is ending in a week or two here finally after 15 seasons. But Mitch Pileggi shows up on Supernatural for a stretch, and so did Stephen Williams. I believe he played an old grizzled monster hunter, basically.
The same role he played, the role he plays in Jason Goes to Hell.
Pretty much. It's always fun to see bleed over with stuff like that. Whether it's the X-Files taking actors from shows that the creators loved, like Twin Peaks or even Star Trek or any other type of genre show that's either running at the same time as the X-Files or before it. And then on down the line, you get to something 20 years later like Supernatural, and they're pulling all kinds of cast members from the X-Files and other stuff like it.
Since you've mentioned that, I'm gonna say right now, I will eventually get around to Supernatural. I've never watched a minute of it, okay? But, I mean, it's 15 seasons. But it's a show that so many friends of mine like it, and it just seems to be that it's probably a really good show, I guess.
2 thumbs up from me. I fell behind at some point. I do need to catch up eventually, but I think I've seen through season 7, maybe season 8. But those first 5 seasons are absolutely perfect.
All right. Well, I mean, you've got half the show to catch up with at this point. If it really is 15 seasons.
I mean, yeah.
That's actually amazing, though. I don't think any genre show. Well, yeah, no, genre. Because as a sci-fi adventure genre show, I don't think there's anything that's run that long.
It's kind of insane because I caught on to the show, I guess, during the second season and managed to backtrack and catch up. and then watched season 3 as it aired, which was a strike season. So it was a shorter order. And I remember at the time reading interviews with the creator, Erix Krycek, who said, he had a 5-season plan. And the ratings weren't bad, but they were at the shaky point where you're sitting there thinking as a viewer, well, I hope he at least gets his 5 seasons. He got his 5 seasons. He bowed out as the showrunner, although stayed on as producer, and then it went on for another 10 fucking years.
That's the thing, and I'm going. I mean, I want to see the show. I'll be curious to dive in at some point. But you look at that, go, that's massive. And how do you keep a storyline going for that long and not have it fall apart? But the thing is that I realize now that there are other shows that have gone on for almost as long, like hour-long dramas, like CSI. I think CSI also went. Yeah, CSI went on for I think about 15 seasons, the original CSI. And then, I know Law and Order, I think, is still going on. And
Probably.
you've got, with all its different spin-offs. So those things last forever. But it is rare to see a genre show do it. Because genre shows, especially modern ones, tend to have overarching mythologies, big storylines, things that sort of stretch and stretch. So at some point you go and you kept that going for 15 years. Wow. And it's on the network model. So these are 28, 22 episode seasons, right?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah. So that's impressive. And I will eventually dive in. So that'll be something.
Sir, if I can recommend something, you'll see that I've outlined several countermeasures.
What about Scully?
Reassigning them to other sections seems only to have strengthened their determination. Scully's a problem. A much larger problem than you described.
Every problem has a solution.
And that is that. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. And if you did enjoy it, there are many ways you can support the podcast, which is available on Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other platforms. You can subscribe, you can rate and or review it depending on what platform you're enjoying it on, and of course you can share and spread the word on social media. Please do any or all of these things. Every little bit helps. Look for the Erix Antoine Network on Facebook or on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter at ErixAntoineNet and check out my film reviews on Letterboxd. You should also check out Daniel Baldwin's website, theschlocketeer.com, and follow him on Twitter at Daniel W. Baldwin. I'm Erix Antoine, and I'll be back in a few days when Daniel and I will be discussing a 2-part story told in the episodes Duane Barry and Ascension. It's the first of these epics for the X-Files, but it definitely won't be the last. And I hope you'll join us. And until then, let's please remember that the truth is out there. See you next time.